Hello and welcome to another edition of Turned Out a Punk. I'm your host, Damian Abraham, and today on the show, someone I've been a huge fan of for a very long time, and someone I never thought I'd get a chance to talk to on this podcast. You may know him from the band Low. You may know him from his two most recent amazing solo records. You may even know him from Zen Identity way back when. Alan Sparhawk is on the show today. As I say, I've been a big fan of Alan for a very long time, a fan of Low for a very long time. Low is a band that, one of the great American bands, like one of the great American indie rock bands, one of the great American punk rock bands, I think we can say after the show today. Alan tragically lost his bandmate and his wife, Mimi Parker, a few years ago, and after she passed away, he took some time and then has come back and done two unbelievable solo records, the latest of which is with Trampled by Turtles, a collaboration with fellow Duluth band Trampled by Turtles. And they are going to be playing a show on December 11th in Minnesota, a couple shows in the new year. But if you have not heard this record with Trampled by Turtles, check it out now. It is a very powerful piece of music, as everything Alan has been involved with tends to be. Links for the record and the shows are found in the description below. There's not too much for me to ramble on about here. This is a fantastic little conversation I got to have with Alan. So I'm not going to ruin it by making some prolonged intro for it. Just other than to say thank you to Tristan for organizing this. Huge thank you to Sub Pop. And sit back, relax, and enjoy Alan Sparhawk on Turned Out a Punk. Alan, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, it's an honor. Thank you. Great to see you.
Well, it's great to see you too. And the honor is very much extended this way to you as well, because I'm a huge fan of your music, and it seems like something that's been in my life for a very long time. And you're someone that I weirdly just never thought I'd get a chance to talk to for this podcast. So now that the opportunity has presented itself, I feel like this is a very long time coming, this conversation for me.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. Yeah, podcasts are a great way for everybody to finally meet each other. I enjoy it. It's great to meet you finally.
It's hard to make adult friends, as
Yeah,
you go through life.
yeah, it's true. It's true. We have a subconscious control on that. Maybe podcasts and things like this, and going on tour and running into people, I think is a nice, safe way to to have friends but keep the distance.
Absolutely. Once my eldest kid started playing baseball and I got exposed to a lot more quote unquote normal parents, I realized I'm going to have to find a way to make other friends, because it's not going to be through mutual love of the game of baseball.
Yeah. That's great. How old are your kids?
Oh, I've got a 16-year-old, a 13-year-old, and then just about to turn 10-year-old.
Oh man, you're in the thick of it. You're getting the full spectrum, I'm sure. That's pretty great.
It's good. It's definitely, I'm trying to take it all in, and every day's it's like a new challenge every day with kids, right?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, just make every crisis chill, and they'll come back to you later in life when they need someone to talk to. So that's my advice for teenage years. That's for sure.
I'm definitely taking that on, because I feel like, the fact that you're making music with your kids, I feel like if I can achieve that at some point where they're coming back to me going, Dad, let's just make music together, that's my dream. So
okay. Well, that's good. Well, the key is to not try too hard and give them the space to find it themselves, and then they'll come find you and have you show you how to play, have you show them how to play something, and that'll be it.
Well, as you're about to find out, Alan, trying too hard is my problem. But this isn't about me. It's about you. And I got to start it off the way they all start off, which is, Alan, how'd you get into punk? Do you remember the first time you ever came across it?
Oh, geez. Well, I'm definitely dating myself here, but um, my my father was a musician. We lived in rural northern Minnesota, very far away from from any exposure to the city or the outside world. And I think the first thing I saw, my father had this book called Making Music, and I think uh, uh, what was his name? The guy that produced all the Beatles records,
George
George something.
Martin.
George Martin. Yeah, George Martin did this book late 70s, early 80s, kind of just the ups and downs of music, making music, everything from four-track recording, home stuff to, the music business a little bit. And I think my dad was just, he was kind of a dabbler, played in some country bands and wrote songs and sort of wanted to learn. And there was a picture in there of a couple different bands. One of them was David Bowie playing with the Spiders from Mars in Japan, and he was stripped down to just bikini briefs, and the band looked really nasty and gnarly. And then also in that book there was a picture of the Sex Pistols, and he talked about the Sex Pistols, and I was like, wow, what is this? And I think around the same time, I think I was over at my aunt's place, and there was a one-page article in People magazine that was a feature, or not a feature, but it's like a one-page little article about punk music and about specifically New York. And it showed a couple pictures of people with spiky hair and kind of gaudy, crazy makeup. And it talked about slam dancing and sort of this intense subculture. Um, Maybe around I think, so interestingly enough, like visually was the the optics of punk was probably the first thing that I saw, and then sort of right around then also was the song "Should I Stay or Should I Go" by the Clash had kind of broke a little bit on the radio, and I remember hearing, up until then I was, I think I was into Pink Floyd and whatever weird 70s, the Doors and stuff like that. My parents had in the record collection, and when I heard that song, I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then when I sort of put the two and two together, this is punk music. I'm like, okay, well, okay, well, that's exactly what I hoped this would be. And so I think I pretty quickly went out and bought a few things. I bought Nevermind the Bollocks by the Sex Pistols. I bought I think by then the Susie and the Banshees, the singles collection. This was maybe, I don't know, might have been 79, 80, 81. I don't know. I'm not sure when those Banshees things came. Maybe that was a little later. But
I think it's probably around then, right? Like they had those early singles.
yeah, yeah. Maybe that was 80, 81 or something like that. But yeah, like again, like first sort of visually through little scraps of information that I'd come across, and then should I stay or should I go? And at the time, um, I think I'd picked up the guitar and kind of was dabbling a little bit, and sort of was pretty quickly intimidated by the music that I was, listening to. And I think uh, when I realized that should I stay or should I go was just three chords, that was also sort of a big explosion in my mind, and like it just kind of reiterated that punk was where my family was and where my tendencies were. And so yeah, I guess, I think meanwhile my cousins had gotten satellite TV, and there were little bits of the very beginnings of MTV. um Devo Devo was on there, and I remember, among all the other things that were sort of on there at the beginning, that resonated with me right away. And um so yeah, I guess kind of a collection of things, and that's what kind of got me going. And little experiences after that, of course, reiterated that. But yeah, for a farm kid, it was fragmented but powerful to me.
Yeah, because I think I heard you describe one time about how you had to picture punk rock. It was much more a visual thing for you in the beginning
Yeah,
before it was ever a sonic thing.
yeah, yeah. Seeing it in this book, and seeing it in People magazine, whatever, this little article that expose about this weird underground cult thing going on. And yeah, yeah, I again, yeah, the visual part grabbed me right away and made me curious. And then, like I said, when I then heard the music and it was everything that I had hoped for, having only seen it, it really sunk deep.
I think it's in that same documentary, the 2008 documentary, you described your parents as traveling hippies
No, my parents, they were, no, actually they were,
or
we
Mormon
were
hippies. Mormon hippies. I try.
Mormon, yeah, Mormon
That's sorry. What I
hippies.
should have said. Mormon hippies.
Yeah, kind of back to the land. There was, I don't know, throughout the Mormon kind of culture, there's this self-sufficiency and prepping for the end of the world kind of thing going on. And I think my parents at a certain point when we were young kind of took that to heart and moved us from Utah out into rural Minnesota to be on a farm and to essentially work toward being self-sustaining, like growing our own food, farming animals, farming. We had a bunch of raw wheat, stored in our basement to live on, and and so yeah, not necessarily hippies, but definitely, yeah. I always say it. I always call it back to the land movement was sort of a post hippie thing. But the Mormon version was, less long hair and weed, and more kind of borderline, you know, borderline hermit, kind of detaching from normal culture kind of vibe. A little culty.
Was the music like? How did your parents react to you kind of getting into this stuff, the punk stuff?
Um, I don't know. I think as I started kind of dressing a little bit to reflect that, for sure, I think my mom was sort of okay with it. I think she was excited that I wanted shorter hair. I think because up until then I would fight her on the haircuts. I think, yeah, she was when I became interested in having spiky hair. I think she kind of didn't see what was going on and just saw that I was finally coming around to short hair. And then uh, I don't know, maybe not until I was maybe 14 or 15. I think there was a little bit of my father the wrong way a little bit with the way I was dressing. I think there was a little bit of, God bless him. I mean, he was a pretty open person, and towards later in life we became pretty good friends. But yeah, he was definitely concerned that I was being a little too androgynous a little bit there when I was, some of the trappings of that, the hints at makeup and jewelry and kind of bandanas hanging off of your, kind of, I don't know. There was a little phase there where like the adamant look was sort of pulling at me, and I think my father was a little bit shocked and gave me some kind of side comments that I remember gritting my teeth about, and you're like, oh yeah, fuck you, Dad. you
Did you
know
look at it as
that,
being like a rejection of your parents' worldview, or is like sort of the end of the world apocalyptic kind of lyrical content of a band like the Sex Pistols kind of in line with that to you at that point?
I mean, it probably was more in line. Again, my parents weren't necessarily, they weren't hippies, so the whole punk against hippie thing didn't necessarily become a factor. But um, I think fascination with sort of subculture and more kind of stuff that was going on in more like cities and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't think they were necessarily like worried that I was pulling away from sort of this more back to the land vibe as much as that. I don't know. It came from Utah, which is pretty sheltered, and we're up on a farm and trying to incorporate into the trying to blend into the the more conservative culture up there too. So I think the different looking clothing and stuff, I mean, understandably was a little bit of a shock to them maybe and a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, I mean, it was a stressful time anyway. My parents kind of had some troubles and divorced when I was early. My father, they separated when I was like 14, 15, and there was a lot of, I was the oldest son, so sort of naturally there was friction between my father and I, and kind of me being old enough to know that he'd fucked up, and but young enough to not realize that if you throw that in his face and agitate him, it's just going to make shit worse. So the grinding against the norm and grinding against maybe what my parents, it's understandable. I think a lot of kids kind of around that time, you're wanting to establish your own vibe, and some of that means sort of identifying with something that's a little bit contrary to your parents. Um, but yeah, I mean, he was kind of out of the house by the time I was, you know, 16, 17, and I was sort of free to be who I wanted to be, and by then I'd gained a few friends who sort of were open to that resonance, despite it being a pretty small community. There were a couple of us, Mim and my, I had known Mim since we'd moved there when I was 9, and we were in the same class, and by the time we were 16, 15, 16, we were pretty tight, and she was into alternative music, and she had a cousin who had lived in Minneapolis who had sent her some records because she knew she was into different music, and stuff like Violent Femmes and Husker Du. So yeah, yeah. By that age, I had a friend or two that felt like we had a little tribe.
I really hear like the Bob Mold influence, or I don't know, at least I'm perceiving it as a Bob Mold influence on Retribution Gospel Choir stuff.
Oh, sure, yeah. Bob definitely. Husker Du was a huge influence on me. Yeah, different phases of my life. There were certain records that were just very present, and I don't know. I think there was something about it being punk, but also pop, really kind of catchy. Also, the way they distorted things, and Bob's guitar was sort of this larger, perverse distortion that resonated to me. And I think ultimately, once I just started getting into guitar, I think by the time I was 19, kind of messing with alternate alternate tunings and sort of, I don't know, I play an open G, and there's a lot of drone possibilities and different voicings on that, and I think when I stumbled on that, I think I subconsciously sort of everything that I had absorbed from Husker Du started to sort of come out, and because yeah, I don't know if Bob necessarily uses different tuning, but there's just something the way he plays and sort of the voicings and the way he puts chords together that was like, oh, uh, I recognize this different voicing vibe, and so yeah, I've definitely recognized that. Yeah, Husker Du is plus Husker Du is from Minneapolis, and sort of that idea that just 3 or 4 hours away was this thing, and by then Prince was a big thing too, so there was a little bit of identity kind of connected with Minneapolis and the punk scene there, and I think at one point, maybe when I might have been 16 or something. I think my mom had gotten this job, and she had to go down to Minneapolis for some training, and she brought me with her, and I was pretty excited. It was the first time I'd been to Minneapolis, and my head was full of images that I was like, oh man, I hope I see some punk stuff, and sure enough, for some reason, we drove by First Avenue, and I remember seeing it and recognizing it just from Purple Rain. And then, you know, some neighborhood we were in. I remember seeing someone in a trench coat and and a mohawk, and I'm like, yes, yes. It was really pretty exciting to me, and still very sheltered. Just being far away and not really having television, or even other than like being at a friend's house or being at my cousin's place who had MTV.
Where were you buying the records like when you were picking up like that Sex Pistols record?
Well, interestingly enough, there was a record store in Bemidji, which is in northwest Minnesota, like maybe half an hour away from where we grew up. And I I don't know, I don't know, I think I bought like the Clash single somewhere at some radio shop nearby, and I think it was just because it was, for a brief period that tune was actually on top 40 radio. Um so that was available, but then in Bemidji there was some dude who was probably hiding from somebody who opened a shop in Bemidji and had a record store, and he was pretty tapped in. And I remember through my teen years kind of going there, bought a couple things. I think as soon as I had gone there and bought, like a Sex Pistols tape or this or that, the guy was like, oh, you're into punk music, eh? Oh, okay. Well, and he would pitch me stuff from time to time, and I think that's where I first heard of the Velvet Underground. Um, and then I don't know, just a handful of things. There's a band called TVBC. It's a Minneapolis band. I don't know. The guy would carry indie stuff, and I think he was sort of tapped into what was going on in Minneapolis and some of the early '80s kind of punk things that were going on there, and he would carry the stuff in his store, and then tip kids like me off. I'm like, hey, yeah, oh, you're into this? Check this out. So that was pretty formative too. But yeah, again, I mean, and if you knew that community, you and sort of got a feel for it, you realize like, yeah, this was an pretty extraordinary thing that this weirdo somehow had to go live in Bemidji. And while he's up there, he's like, well, I'll open up a record store and see what happens. So yeah, Side One Records, I think it was called.
Damn, sounds like lucky for you that this guy had problems.
Yeah, yeah, lucky he was hiding. I mean, I think in hindsight, he was probably trying to clean up. Uh, and sometimes that's the best way to do is get the hell away from all your connections.
Absolutely. Was TVBC on Twin Tone?
I think so. Yeah, yeah. Shoot, I mean, I don't know. I'd have to look up and we'll see when that record came out. I might not have picked it up until maybe I was 17, 18 or something like that, and pretty close to going off to college or whatever. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that I remember, U2, let's see, War. I remember getting that kind of early on. Um, uh, the Cure was a big one as well.
I hear that. I hear actually the U2 and the Cure influence on the Zen Identity guitar playing stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, I was very into the Edge, the Echo, the Echo, and sort of counter funk rhythm going on there. Yeah, Zen Identity. Oh, you found that, huh?
There's a great video of the whole set, and the vocals are not my thing, but your guitar playing is really cool because then it's also very sparse at different times, and the mix
Yeah.
on this video it's all guitar, so you really
Oh,
can
that's great.
pick up everything.
Yeah, I think that was at some metal bar over in Superior, and we opened for someone that probably I don't know, someone that I don't know how we got on the bill because we were sort of the weird U2 REM crossover band, and sort of uh yeah, almost, yeah. That was a fun band. When Jane's Addiction hit, that I don't know, that's it sort of pushed that band into some cool territory there towards the end. But yeah, that footage that's out there, that's very much me being influenced by U2 and REM and um, a little bit of Susie and the Banshees. In hindsight, was pretty early uh, subconscious influence on my approach for sure.
Yeah, there's like a real post punk kind of edge
Yeah,
to the playing that you're doing.
yeah,
Was that the show opening for Quiet Riot?
yeah. I think yeah, that's right. That's what it is. It was quite.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
oh man, yeah, they must have been on a tough downward spiral circuit at that point. Just funny because I think a few years later, they were on some kind of revival monsters of rock, or I don't know, some sort of tour where they were playing with a few other 80s bands. And in the 90s when I still worked, after we started Low, I was still working at this arena in town, and they would call me up to do production running, and sometimes I'd end up driving the bands around, and there was a very zen moment at one point in the early 90s where I had Quiet Riot in my minivan. I was driving them to their hotel. They're all like they're all like looking at their laptops. It was really early email days.
Metal has second acts.
Yeah.
So that's not in Duluth, right? Like, when did you move to Duluth? Was it for college?
Yeah, I moved to Duluth in 87. I went, let's see, 86. I graduated high school in 86, and I went to BYU for one school year, freshman year of college. Mostly my mom was really, I don't know. It was just culturally a thing that you did, and my mom was really wanted me to go there and get away from my girlfriend at the time, who was Mim, and so so I went there for one year and then came back and was like, nah, I'm going where my girlfriend is, and went to Duluth in 87, and so yeah, lived here, went to college, got the job at the arena at some point while I was still in Zen Identity. Yeah, Zen Identity was the band that I got into, or that I played with for a few years when I moved to Duluth. So I guess probably 80s, 88 to 93, kind of left that band and started Low.
BYU is in Utah, right? I
Yeah, yeah,
apologize for
it's
that.
BYU's the Mormon university out there.
Stefan from the Descendants and all, when he's been on the podcast, he grew up in Utah in Salt Lake City, and he said there was like a real adversarial
Yeah,
relationship with some of the locals in punk.
yeah, yeah. Counterculture in Utah was very severe, and I don't know. It's kind of the only way I can describe it. There was no middle ground. There was no like, we just like to hang out and drink beers. If you were not in, you know, or if you were at all interested in something alternative or kind of counterculture and not kind of the normal cookie cutter, this is, up until the late 80s. I think things kind of blurred a little bit more kind of over the last few decades for sure. But at the time when I was out there, if you were interested in anything alternative, by the time you found that culture, you'd be deeply in like a counter thing. And in some ways, like it was sort of baked in that you had to be almost anti-Mormon, all anti-establishment, anti your parents. It wasn't, there was no, there was nothing casual about counterculture in Utah. It was, if you were in that scene, you were deeply in it, which had its pluses and minuses. There's some pretty cool people and some really extreme people that I met that really were influential. There was a really great radio station there that KRCL that would on like late nights play some of the most hard, the first time I heard like Fetus and Coil and Birthday Party and stuff like that were on this station, and because they would just go deep, and there were dance clubs there, even though it was the 80s, it was sort of like DJ disco stuff, and it was heavy into like early, pre-rave, kind of dance music. Um, and and different things like that, and and also drugs, like if you weren't just, like I said, you weren't just having a few beers or smoking a little weed. It was just like immediately hard stuff. So it was really kind of a shock to go there and be just like, hey, I just want to hear some I just want to hang out and listen to some punk music, and just immediately being in touch with these really intense, like like hard people, and kind of, you know like, yeah, just contrary, and almost like satanic, even, like really like satanic culty shit. It was like, whoa, all right. But yeah, the punk, yeah, the scene, I don't know, just if you were in there, it was, I mean, you wouldn't think it, as someone way on the outside, but yeah, I mean, the underground scene in Utah was hard, and some really fucking intense people, and some pretty fringy out shit going on, that you get little blips of every once in a while, but I don't know. Yeah, that was my experience. It was cool. Made a lot of really extreme friends, and kind of exposed to, for a farm kid, who'd only, you know, gathered, a dozen records and magazine articles. It was, to me, it was a really immersive and cool. I mean, there was a alternative theater. I mean, this was like late 80s. There was an alternative theater there, where called Blue Mouse Theater, where you could go see all kinds of really borderline fucked up movies and stuff. And I don't know. Yeah, it was interesting. Definitely scared me a little bit. There was definitely like trouble that I could have easily fallen into, if I'd have stuck around a little longer. But yeah, it was weird going back there. One later on, when it started low, and would go through there and on tour. At least through the 90s, the scene it was very, very small, but very intense, very underground. A lot of, like squat shows, and just, again, you just would run into some of the harshest, most devoted countercultural people you'd ever meet, in Utah.
It's funny you say that, because everyone I've talked to who's part of that scene, especially like, and as you say, it changed into the 90s, but like that like 80s scene is talks about the drugs, talks about how quickly it was to fall into hard drugs from, like you're saying, just weed. It
Yeah,
eventually got real nuts real quick.
yeah, yeah. It was, again, it was coming, I was coming from, pretty straight-laced farm kid who had never even drank before, so it was both a shock that way, but then, again, going back there later on, it reiterated that for sure.
I also think that reflects the music that came out of there. Like, you think like Massacre Guys or Maimed for Life or Local Death Squad, LDS, or The Stench. Like, it's all like real in your face. It's not like the Ramones, or
Right.
it's like very confrontational. Like you're saying, like I guess if there's something to rebel against, you might as well rebel twice as hard if you're going to get kind of
Yeah,
ostracized anyway.
that's exactly it. Yeah, and for better or worse, the culture of Mormonism is pretty, can be viewed as pretty restrictive. And if you're someone who's a little bit different, you're by the time you're by the time you're a teenager, you've really butted heads with that, whether it's your parents or church, or just being surrounded by this kind of a lot more obviously homogenized, but also, sort of anxiety inducing stringency to it. And so yeah, there's something about that. Like I said, if you're rebelling against that, you're really got a lot more of a stack of things to scream about, than just, my dad's a jerk, I don't like Fleetwood Mac, it's like, no, dude, you're out for blood.
Yeah.
If you know it, because there's so much at stake. If you step out of that and decide, like, I am not part of this, it's a huge, full soul, full body detachment and rebellion, and a lot of pent up frustration over being held down or looked at weirdly, or marginalized because, you had some, probably started out as just a hint of something, like you were into this, or, you were gay or something like that. And it just the culture, unfortunately, just makes that contrast a little harsher. So there's, and I mean, and I'm not here to necessarily diss the church or anything like that. It's just the inevitability, or it's just what happens when something is that sort of concentrated, and it's sort of a whole community is based on, a particular religion sort of being, you got to realize, like Mormonism was started as a very counterculture thing. I mean, these people were kicked out of America, and they had to go, they had to stop, like, multiple places and try to build a civilization, and then get kicked out again by people who didn't like them. So by the time the Mormons got out to Utah in the 1800s, they were like, all right, well, this is our thing, man. Let's do it. And it's unique, to America. Like I said, there's no other place where just there's this whole region where most of the culture comes out of this very separate culture that kind of had to go there to survive initially. And maybe as a reaction to that, the culture then becomes its own restrictive, kind of oppressive thing that that is, unfortunately, a little more, little more intolerant, unfortunately, of something that maybe initially would have just been. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, anything counter, I suppose, at one point would have felt like a threat. So the culture sort of clamps down even harder.
I started doing TikToks for this show to promote the episodes, and so I fell into looking at TikTok. And I don't know what brought me into this in the algorithm, but all of a sudden I was brought into sort of Mormon BYU TikToks about
Oh,
just people going
yeah,
around interviewing each other about different subjects, and it was eye opening to me that, like you're saying, it is culturally so different than necessarily a lot of places around it because of the
for
the
sure.
religion tied to the state.
Yeah, yeah, and BYU is its own interesting twist, because you're pulling in Mormons from all over the world, essentially, and there's a little bit of, like, being drawn to there because they want to be part of that culture, and they're drawn to this, finally I'm in a place where everybody has the same beliefs, and it just, in some, for better or worse, you end up it sort of amplifies its own homogenized culture, because everybody's sort of a little bit excited to be there, and kind of everybody be on the same page, and so yeah, it, because of that, then, like, weird phenomena happen, and, kind of their own thing that only gets they just kind of amplify each other in this weird.
Well, to me, it's interesting because on this, like, I was shocked how many of these kids, college level kids, hadn't seen a rated R movie, and
Yeah,
like, and it very proudly say that. And here you are, me and me off air talking about Skinny Puppy. So clearly, you're engaged with a type of this culture that is like would be just mind blowing for a lot of these kids.
yeah, very, very counter to that, and I'm not, I don't know, you know most people are okay with normal shit, and that's fine. But yeah, again, for me, for some reason, it just I got there and I could see it, even though I came from that thing, that kind of upbringing and sort of recognize that, okay, I'm going to this place where I'm going to finally be surrounded with people that are the same as me instead of being the only Mormon kid in my class. I'll be like all these Mormon. I don't know. I think, yeah, I kind of, I showed up already feeling a little bit of an outsider because I felt like I was being a little bit pushed to go there and I wasn't into it. But also by then I was already into, you know, I was already into alternative music and different shit. And for me, I was more excited to be like, wow, college. I'm gonna find the other people that are into this. There's got to be some people that are into it. And much like everywhere else in the culture in the '80s, it was underground and very much a minority. And once you just have to go walk around campus and look for like, who's got the weird haircut. I'm gonna go be friends with them. Who in the dorm is blasting some punk music. Okay, I'm gonna become friends with them, and because of that, that culture bonds together really quickly. They too were probably excited to meet someone who was into something different, and we're probably feeling a little weird uh, in amongst the homogenized vibe there. So people really flocked to each other, and it was exciting. I was in a band there, made friends that I still have. Yeah, actually, yeah, a good handful of people that I met there and played music with are still friends of mine.
What was that band called?
I was in a band called 3D Psycho Paisley.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you guys record?
No, I don't know. I don't think there's any evidence of it anywhere, video or anything like that. But yeah, I don't know. We played a party, and there was a club in town that would do music a few nights a week, and I think as weird as we were, we ended up playing there a couple times. But yeah, one of the guys in the band ended up is a guy named Riley Fogg, who's a singer, and I don't know. We were into the Smiths and stuff like that, and Depeche Mode was kind of this also part of the alternative vibe there. I don't know. There was a while there in the late '80s where Depeche Mode would come on tour in the United States and they'd play New York, San Francisco, Chicago, and Salt Lake. Because there was just this big kind of new wave, kind of post romantic, you know, uh, yeah, there was a strain of that in the punk culture in the '80s in Utah for some reason. The sort of preppy, like I said, the Smiths and Depeche Mode, kind of this kind of post new wavy, preppy kind of vibe. And yeah, Riley ended up kind of in the '90s, kind of running a space in Salt Lake called the Moroccan, and that was a place. I think a lot of that was like before that was the place to play before. Was it Kilby Court now in Salt Lake? Is a place called Kilby Court that's been around for quite a while, and they were basically just an alley garage squat. I mean, by squat I mean just a space that was sort of not it was not really registered as an establishment or a bar or anything like that. It was just a space where they'd kind of have shows, and it was kind of just small enough that the city didn't crack down too much, but then every once in a while things would get big enough that the city would crack down and be like, ah, you guys don't have license to do this, and. So yeah, it was a place called the Moroccan, that was sort of, yeah, late '80s, early '90s was kind of, well, '90s before Kilby Court. That was the place to do stuff, and now he lives in LA, and he filmed a lot of like Billie Eilish's. He does a lot of film and live video production for stuff like Bonnaroo, and He did the Billie Eilish movie. Just I don't know. A dude I was in a band with who just kind of kept going and very creative person.
Well, I feel like that's the thing about this, punk being the umbrella term for it is like it just brings a lot of people in to a culture where you can kind of just make your own rules and do your own thing, and you can kind of see, where all these different people wound up, like directors, producers, writers, photographers,
Yeah,
like not necessarily making this kind of music, but at the same time, like they came out of this thing.
yeah, creative people who, it's on the one hand being creative and original, but then also like someone who gets shit done. And punk and sort of the underground has these opportunities, like may do a fanzine, have a space, put on basement shows. It's those are the building blocks of like, okay, well, you're into something. Here, you gotta do, here's how you put something together, here's how you do this thing. And it's inevitable that it expands. And if a person's good at it, they're gonna end up being the people who make all the movies and make music that eventually becomes more widespread, different things like that, or run magazines or media companies, sometimes anyway.
So then you go move back to Duluth after that, and Duluth is also an interesting place for music stuff. Like as you say, it's pretty close to Minneapolis, so there's a lot of like, I guess, a replacements first out of town gig was in
Yeah,
Duluth, and
yeah,
um, Husker Du played, and Babes in Toyland would play. So it feels like there was a little bit of that kind of cross pollination.
yeah, yeah. There was, yeah, even being, like I said, being even, 4 or 5 hours away up in the north, there was sort of a community pride about it. I think my senior year in high school, I would go to Bemidji to take a few classes, and one of them was radio broadcasting, and I got to DJ once every 2 weeks on the college station there. And that was where, that was another exposure to stuff, and that was where I first heard the Replacements. It was kind of right around then that Tim came out, I think, and saw them on Saturday Night Live and stuff like that. That was it was exciting. And Prince again, there was sort of a Minneapolis uh, pride, so to speak, being from Minnesota. But yeah, Duluth, still off the beaten path, and north, there's a little bit of an underdog vibe here, because it's a smaller town, and you got to hustle a little bit harder to, it seems like, to kind of feel like what you're doing is legitimate. And there's definitely like a feeling like, well, okay, well, if you're really going to do something, you need to go down to Minneapolis and do it. you know? So, so there's a lot of that. And, but yeah, I don't know. It was a good place to, like I said, when I moved back, I was in this band Zen Identity for a few years, and that was fun. And we would go and play Minneapolis every once in a while and try to gain some fans there and try to break into, this really thriving scene. And, you'd meet people and kind of a little bit of networking going on there. But yeah, by the time we started Low, um, I don't know. I mean, Minneapolis was still kind of the bigger scene, but I don't know, with Low, because we kind of skipped that. And when we first started, I sent out some demos, and we went to New York and recorded our first record. And because this guy Kramer was someone that I'd sent demos to, and he invited us out, and that's kind of how Low started. So in some ways, we kind of bypassed the, all right, got to go down to Minneapolis and try to get some attention there. Um, but because of that, I think it ended up, I don't know, we ended up kind of having a lot more longevity with the local scene, you know. Um, kind of we were already kind of touring out of state before we necessarily played in Minneapolis. And so by the time we started to play Minneapolis, there was a little bit more legitimacy there. We weren't necessarily trying to convince people there as much as just people who had heard about us would start showing up, you know.
Mm-hmm. Because I guess you get John Nichols to join like Zen Identity, right? Like towards the
Yeah,
end.
yeah. At the end, the band was kind of fragmenting, and we were trying to move to Minneapolis and sort of trying to take that next step. And yeah, John was in the band for a brief period, played a couple shows with us, and meanwhile, he and I were getting to be pretty good friends and talking about music and talking about things that we're into, and sort of also at a point kind of realizing that Zen identity was sort of falling apart, and that we weren't going to be able to really work with these guys. So yeah, he and I started talking about things that we liked. A lot of common ground with minimalism, Joy Division, The Cure, Brian Eno, Lamont Young, um, Glenn Branca. Just yeah, even like Sonic Youth. Um, Kind of a little bit more of an out. I think by then I'd heard Yola Tango, Galaxy 500. Uh, Certainly was an influence, and that's why I sent our first demos to Kramer. But yeah, John and I resonated on some stuff, and I had kind of had this idea brewing. Um, and meanwhile, actually, there was 91, 92, there was kind of a really great scene that started happening in Duluth, kind of not unlike any kind of more medium or small city. Like by then, like, Nirvana had broke, alternative music was sort of like a lot more kind of coming into the mainstream, and like, younger people were suddenly, the culture was like looking for different music, alternative music, and a lot more, kids at that point were kind of a lot looking for more of an eclectic thing. So there was actually a pretty great scene in Duluth, and so when we were like, hey, let's put this together, maybe I can convince Mim to play the drums. you know, we wrote like four songs and got on a bill opening for some friends at this all ages space in town that was doing stuff on the weekends, and there was sort of a built-in crowd there already because, like I said, people were, there was just, yeah, there was sort of a cultural explosion of young people going like, I want to go to a show, I want to go see a band, I want to be in a band. Um, so so it was just, I don't know, there was sort of a built-in crowd. We'd play in front of 50, 60 people, and only 10 of them paid attention, but but I don't know, we knew we were onto something, and just because we liked what we were doing, and it felt like it was pushing an edge with people, even though people were into, you know alternative music was sort of exploding, like the whole idea of playing so slow and so quiet still felt pretty contrary and challenging, so that, I don't know, there was something about that was appealing. uh you know so yeah, that was kind of how that started, and yeah, John and I kind of were just, I don't know, long nights driving back from Minneapolis from band rehearsal is sort of how uh how the concept of Low came together.
Yeah, because the band sounds so unique. And I was listening to, I think it's called Lorenzo's Tractor today, like a song I
Oh,
heard of
geez.
John's band, and then this Miracles tape, which I found on Discogs that John played on, which is like really arty stuff.
Yeah,
And so it's interesting, like listening to your guitar playing in Zen Identity and hearing the stuff he was doing around then, how it kind of comes together, and Low's kind of ultimately what kind of comes out of the whole thing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, John was definitely coming from kind of goth and more ethereal music. By then I was already pretty into like My Bloody Valentine and some of the early, what would become, known as shoegaze and stuff like that. So there was sort of a resonance there. Uh, John was, you know, John was bringing in the Brian Eno, which I knew about, but I hadn't really been immersive in, and sort of seeing that further outside element of minimalism, especially. Um, so yeah, there was definitely a yeah. Lorenzo's Tractor was something him and his high school buddy had been doing. Um, um, yeah, more a little bit electronic kind of beats,
Definitely
and then kind of a
gothy.
gothy,
Yeah.
gothy kind of sound tweak, early four track post goth kind of stuff. Yeah.
Um, and you mentioned kind of briefly just sending tapes to New York. Is that like that live tape that you guys kind of had, like the unofficial demo? It just says low on the cover. There's probably multiple covers, I imagine, but
Yeah. Yeah, there's a demo. I think on that box set that we put out, I think we included maybe two of the demos. Yeah, we did just yeah, four track. The other guy from Lorenzo's Tractor um um record, we did our first show and we were like, wow, we should demo. This was cool. Let's demo these songs. And I'll send out some recordings to some people and see if there's some interest. And so yeah, we did I think Cut and Lullaby and maybe one other song that we had, and yeah, those are the demos. It was just basically like, you know, set up and play the song with some mics up. Really didn't know much about it, what we were doing, but it worked. Kramer put it on. According to Kramer, he put the tape on and listened for 10 seconds, and was like, all right, cool. Sent us a letter.
so is that how the Vernon Yard recordings thing came about? Because that's like a Sony sub label, right?
Yeah, yeah. They were Warner Brothers. I don't know if they were part of Sony at that point, but
Okay.
yeah, it was, or no, it was Virgin.
Oh, Virgin.
They were a
Sorry. Yeah, that's
sub. They were a sub of Virgin. It was, and um, yeah, this A&R guy, uh, this British A&R guy who had worked for Virgin, I think at some point, because of what was going on in underground or whatever. It was like, okay, you can have a little boutique label. They would call them boutique labels back then. It was like, someone who worked for the company would have their own little branch, and they would go around and try to find small bands, and with a little budget. And yeah, we originally, when Kramer reached out to us on the demo, I think originally he had thought like, okay, maybe these kids can come out, you know I'll charge them for studio time. How much money do you have? It's like, we're like, I don't know, how's it going? You're like, how much money? And I'm like, well, I got $400. Like, okay, come on out.
just
You know,
enough. It worked out
yeah, just
perfectly.
enough to work for a day. So we went out, and yeah, when we got there, I think the original thought was we were being enticed there because Kramer had Shimmy Disc, and he kind of said like, oh, come on and record. Maybe we can do a single or something. And so we went out there, and in one day essentially recorded 4 or 5 songs. And by the time we started doing vocal overdubs, he became very interested, and and clearly was kind of excited about us, and thought, okay, well, this is cool. I've got some people I know who might be interested in this. Why don't you guys go home and write some more songs and come back in a month, and let's finish a record. And so we left, so we went home, wrote a few more songs, and meanwhile he pitched what he'd recorded to someone he knew at Vernon Yard. And they were interested in us, and so yeah, by the time we went back to do the rest of the record, there was already these people from Vernon Yard who were interested in us. And once it was done, then they approached us about a contract, and it was very, very small. It was just enough money to pay Kramer and a
Convenient.
lawyer. Conveniently,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. For a day, for basically 2 days worth of work, he got he got our whole advance, which wasn't very much. I mean, it was, you know, but nonetheless, yeah, it worked out. So very quickly. I mean, I think we started the band in like a April, played our first show in May, and recorded. I think we finished. We recorded our record with Kramer in August and September, and then it came out January or top of February the very next year. So yeah, started the band and had a record out within 9 months, I think.
It's so interesting when a band does that, like goes from demo to, I guess, like obviously a boutique, but it's still like part of a major big
Oh
label
yeah,
type like that.
yeah. I mean, they got us exposure, got us reviewed in magazines and distribution, which at the time was half the battle. I mean, if you could get into stores, people would at least see it and take it seriously, and you know, probably be a couple of record store clerks who would play it over the PA, and there were a lot of stories of that where the clerk would catch wind of it and play it over the thing, and someone would come up and like, "Who's this?" And that's how we'd sold a lot of our first few records, and yeah, getting in magazines. The label had pull enough to where if they sent a record out, the writers would at least take a listen.
Yeah, like my brother and I got into, or probably first heard you on the CMJ CD.
Oh
You guys
yeah,
were on.
yeah, yeah. That was a big break too, I think. Yeah, those were a big deal.
Huge.
Yeah.
When CDs were like $22 a pop to get a compilation and be able to sample
Oh
so
yeah,
much stuff, it
yeah,
was immense.
yeah, yeah. I had a couple of those early ones. They were cassettes originally.
Oh, they did. Oh, I guess because it would have actually been for college music programmers, I imagine at one point, legitimately, not
Yeah,
just 13-year-old and 12-year-old kids in Toronto,
yeah,
Canada.
yeah. Yeah, pretty cool.
Did you have any like issues personally about signing with a major label, kind of, or did you feel that sort of same sort of baggage that a lot of people in coming out of punk have with that?
Well, I think, kind of around, 93, the argument of indie major wasn't quite happening yet. I think that was the time where bands got signed, and then within a year and a half, everybody was like, "Holy shit, that was a huge mistake!" And like, "Oh," and then people started telling each other like, "Oh, don't sign with a major, you're gonna get whatever of it." And then very quickly by 95, 96, everybody was, it was very much a tribal thing about like, were you indie or were you on a major? So we kind of, partially out of ignorance and then partially just timing, we that element wasn't quite there. I remember, like, there were a few people that we met early on who kind of gave us a little bit of warning, like, "Hey, are you sure? You can," like we met Azalea Snail the first time we played New York. We played at Knitting Factory when we went out to do that first initial recording with Kramer. And we met, there were only 10 people in the audience, and a couple of people came up to us and talked to us and became friends and stuff. And one of them was Azalea Snail, and she's like, "Oh, who are you talking to?" I'm like, "Oh, blah blah blah." I'm like, "Oh shoot, be careful. That's really a major." And I'm like, "Oh, what's gonna happen?" It's you know, and also, I mean, not to say that I don't know, the contract was still 20 some pages or whatever, but the amount of money they were giving us, it really did feel, it felt like an indie. And not to like, Kramer is a good friend, and he really helped us out, and really, really, we owe so much to him. But he was pretty encouraging of it. He's like, "Oh no, this is going to be great. They're going to take care of you." And the A&R people that worked there were pretty savvy. This person, Liz Brooks, who was the A&R person there. She was very she was very much part of the underground and very, very kind of part of that. And the other band, there were other bands already on Vernon Yard that were small and indie, and we thought, okay, well, maybe this is a safe place. And and of course, to this day we're still fighting to get our masters back from from us, whoever owns all of that now. I think it's Warner Brothers or Universal. Universal owns it, and that's been definitely a regrettable thing. Like those first three or so records that we did with them are kind of in their control, and we really don't have much say about who comes along and licenses them, and we don't make any money. There's like literally no residuals off of it, even though they're still in circulation from time to time. And um, but yeah, I mean, it was pretty too late by the time we were in there. And like I said, it didn't feel like we were signing to a major, at that point. Still the language around that was still just beginning. People weren't really talking about that, like I said, until probably the mid 90s, and after a few people had been really, classically screwed over. And so it just felt like the right thing. It's like, hey, they're gonna pay for this, we're gonna be able to, they're gonna put the records out. Is okay, this seems cool. And but yeah, I mean, pretty quickly, we could feel there were definitely some hindrances. We would get some pushback sometimes on stuff. They'd complain about the mastering about something. We would want to do an EP, and there'd be some resistance there, and different things, that were kind of, you know, definitely the kind of thing that we didn't run into ever again. And then, yeah, I think once we met Cranky and sort of, like I said, by the mid 90s, it was pretty clear that, like, okay, this label is problematic. They give us money, but we're obviously getting, we're having to pay this back with a fraction of the price of what people are paying for records. It was pretty hard not to become pretty well versed in how shitty the business was by that time. So we were definitely looking to get out. And when the opportunity came to move on and work with Cranky came along, we definitely pushed for that and got out. Um, I don't know. We worked with some great people. This guy named David. Eventually, kind of after Liz left, was our A&R guy, and he did a great job and did the best he could to take care of us. At some point, we through the Virgin thing and kind of adjacent, we sort of started working with Rough Trade a little bit, and this guy named Jeff Travis over there who was cool, and still under the window, or still under the umbrella of a larger company. But I don't know, it was all right. And despite all that, we the records came out, and fans found us, and we got, we were taken seriously just enough to kind of at least get our foot in the door and get people to listen to some things that maybe otherwise it wouldn't have if we were, struggling starting out on something smaller. So it was cool. And again, the royalties are nothing. The percentages on those contracts are pretty criminal. So that's the trade-off, so to speak. Luckily, we didn't get completely screwed over. We were able to do the records we wanted to do, and luckily we were able to move on to indie labels from then on.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Is like you're a band that all like has this career where obviously you're on this major label, but then it's almost like the career starts once you get off it in a second act in a way, or like there's like a sort of a whole other dimension of the band.
Yeah,
Even during the major label period, like you're doing records on independent labels at the same time.
yeah. They allowed us to be on compilations and do little things here and there. So we were able to. still participate in sort of the scene that we wanted, that had had embraced us. And yeah, no, it worked out cool. I mean, hanging out long enough, really was is probably the key to everything. Everything was very gradual. Every record there was it seemed to do a little better and a little bit more. A few more people would come to shows, and we toured a lot. I mean, we were really, records were cool, and we would get, it was nice to be able to put them out, but the meat and potatoes of what we did, and sort of the way we connected, and the money that we made, most of it was playing shows.
Yeah, and you worked with Sub Pop, I guess, for the first time in '97, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh wow, really? 90, wow, okay.
That
Yeah,
was the
Sub
first
Pop.
vinyl record I had by you guys.
Yeah, yeah. I guess, wow, it seems, I don't know. It felt like we were with Cranky longer than that. Maybe it's because we still get checks from Cranky. We still get really pretty decent checks, and it's because they're a great label. They're very frugal, and Joel is really good about keeping the records out there without you know spending too much money. And so and he gives us a really amazing percentage. So yeah, we still get checks from Cranky that are sometimes bigger than the ones we get with Sub Pop. So, but yeah, Sub Pop, I don't know. We Sub Pop obviously was sort of on the radar ever since we were even before the band. I remember, hearing those records, and being into that scene, and then sort of all along having some favorite bands on Sub Pop, Red Meat, different things like that. And I don't know, we met John Poneman uh, at some point in the '90s, and he was really nice to us and complimentary, and yeah, I mean, for better or worse, again, no, we love Cranky, and we're still really really good friends with those guys and stuff, and by all means, we probably would have been fine continuing on that label, but um, I don't know. Sub Pop seemed like a good thing, and as much as they're a big label, they are under the umbrella of Warner Brothers, I believe. Still, it's a pretty unique and independent situation. I think, they obviously can do whatever they want. They've always let us do whatever we want. Um, they pay for everything that needs to be paid for, and I think as best as they can, they give us as respectable of a percentage as you could hope for on a label that's, again, under the umbrella of something bigger. So
No disrespect to them as a band or anything, because I love them, but you might be the only person I've ever heard say I love a lot of bands on Sub Pop and then followed up with Red Meat as the first band on your list. I love them though, but I think it's a testament to how
yeah, I
much
don't
you love
know.
them.
Yeah, that was, I don't know. We met those guys early in Chicago. I mean, we met those guys early on when we first started playing in Chicago, and they kind of they're like a gang.
That's
They're like
awesome.
a Chicago fucking serious, like get in fist fights gang, and they somehow for some reason took us under their wing, and kind of would take care of us, and uh and we love the records. I don't know how many times, but Bunny Gets Paid is probably one of the top, in the top five records that we've probably listened to over and over and over and over again throughout my life.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome. Another band I
but
associate you with because of the split, and also I think because I saw you guys here at Lee's Palace one time, is Ida.
yeah,
And when did the relationship with Ida first start?
that was pretty early on. The gal, one of the women in Tsunami, uh, what was their label?
Simple Machine? No, is
Simple Machines, yeah. Simple, yeah. We met them we met, we played with them at a festival in DC kind of early on that a record store put on, and those guys came up to us and handed me a CD and said, "Here, I think I think you'd get along with these folks. And I think sometime shortly after that, we did meet them and did a lot of touring with Ida. And yeah, they're good friends of ours, and we had a lot of really pretty precious times with them. And they're it's more than just a band that we played with. They're family. You know, we all started having kids around the same time and would take care of each other's kids while the other one was on stage and stuff like that. So I did some recording with them, and yeah, Ido were very fast friends, and you know, I mean, it wasn't, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we also happened to be, you know, sort of all playing sort of more delicate music and, you know, harmonies and whatnot, but uh, definitely some of our dearest friends and uh, people we spent a lot of time on the road with.
I wanted to ask you, was playing soft and slow, was that a conscious reaction at all to hardcore?
Um, yeah, somewhat. I mean, you know, like I said, kind of back in 92, 93, there was sort of this explosion of alternative music, and a lot of it was really based around grunge and, you know, and kind of post Nirvana and this sort of louder, um, you know, a little bit still kind of, I don't want to say macho, but just sort of a little bit of like, "Rah," you know, and, you know, kind of fueled by, yeah, fueled by a little bit of the physicality and the volume of hardcore. And I don't know, we weren't necessarily like, fuck that shit, we're gonna do something else, or you know, it wasn't so much that we didn't like that and we wanted to be counter to that, or that we wanted to destroy hardcore or anything like that. I think it was just more just like, okay, I mean, we've kind of been talking about this minimal music and sort of the tension of, you know, I think by then I had seen a show like Beat Happening, which is really skeletal, uh, and kind of disturbing in how minimal it was. And there was something about that kind of was informing, like, wow, okay, I know there's this music going on and everybody's really into it, and I'm into it too. But there's something kind of a next level kind of contrary a little bit and almost kind of borderline uncomfortable about someone who's doing something minimal and then the idea of playing soft kind of even was like, whoa, man, people are going to be, this is going to be so uncomfortable for people who came to the show wanting to get their brains blown out, you know? And so yeah, it was there kind of at the formation of the band, but then as we would do shows and sort of realize that, wait a minute, this is kind of our contrary superpower here, because we would get that's what people would react to. I mean, the minimalism, the sort of the ethereal, the harmonies, and you know whatever was just us kind of doing us. But the quietness and the slowness, and sort of really quickly realizing how that would divide people. Like some people would just, you know, we would get really adverse reactions from some people, you know, and something about that was appealing and kind of fueled us a little bit and gave us this sense of like, oh no, we're out here making something that's challenging and and uh and in yeah, those first few years with Low, it was the quietness was sort of the blade that we would wield and and would get, like I said, we would get sometimes just really hostile reactions, and to me, I don't know, for some reason there was something about that really appealed, and it was kind of codifying and strengthening to the unit in some ways, because like, here we are, okay, let's get up there, let's see what kind of, let's see who we can, you know, part of doing the show was was like, okay, let's see what kind of adverse reaction we can get, you know, and you know, it would almost be, I don't know. I mean, I'm proud of the fact that we've had cups thrown, you know, we've had a shower of plastic cups, you know, thrown at us, and I'm proud of the fact that there've been people on the edge of the stage fucking berating us, you know, and you know, and I'm proud of being called, you know, called, just called names,
Yeah.
while I'm playing music. There was something about that that just, to me, yeah, kind of early on the band, the way we were doing it. I don't know, there was something that unified us about that, and sort of was more of, I don't know, to me it was sort of a testament that we were onto something if it if it was bothering a few people, uh, you know,
I love that where it's like it's almost like an aggressive softness or an
yeah,
aggressive.
yeah. I mean, we kind of evolved and moved in and out of that over the years, but yeah, those first few years, first few records, and especially the shows, that was really foundational for us.
Sorry, Jets
Um,
go.
I have to fly to Montreal today.
Oh well, you're going to be right next door to me. So yeah, I
Oh, no
won't
kidding.
keep you anymore. Anytime you want to come back on and talk about aggressive softness or anything, you are always welcome here, Alan.
Okay. Thank you.